Hi, I'm Dr. Montagna. We're continuing this series on Candida and leaky gut. Candida being the root of almost all sickness because it's involved in so much of chronic illness. In this section, we're going to go over the microbiota, what's normal and what's pathological. So when we start to look at the health of the gut, this picture right here on the right side, the left side pictures a normal gut lining. The left side pictures normal gut lining. The right side pictures a very unhealthy gut lining. And when we see the unhealthy gut lining, the microvilli that cover the lining of the gut, that increases the surface area of the gut many-fold. It takes that tube that's 30 foot long with the average diameter of your little finger. It makes a surface area of that about the size of an Olympic tennis court. So it's huge what the microvilli do, and it's also where a lot of the microflora hide, in between the folds and the fingers that's sticking up. We deplete the blood supply, they'll start to decrease and allows pathogenic overgrowth to go on. It has a lot to do with our digestion, the flora does, and it has a lot to do with homeostasis, or the normalizing of all of our function. The flora is tied in with the health of our gut lining, its proliferation, it has a lot to do with immune function. The flora communicates back and forth with the brain. It affects our brain function in a huge way. So when we look at how the flora starts to grow, typically when an infant descends down through a birth canal, the mouth gets opened and the infant gets an inoculation of the mother's flora. If that flora is good, that child has just inherited a huge asset in life. If the mother's flora in her reproductive tract is not good, that infant has just inherited the basis to become chronically ill. So it really starts here. Then they started doing studies with infants, and they started to notice when they're very young, like in hospital settings, they start to mimic they start to develop the same flora of all of the handlers that take care of them, which lets us know that there's not a lot of really good hand washing techniques that go on with handling children at a very young age, and also that the stomach acid really isn't working very well in a infant's stomach, so they don't really have the mechanisms to fight off the bad stuff that gets in here. So it's really important to keep them in a healthy environment so they're going to grow healthy flora. With that, this is a view of what a typical Candida look like in the yeast form. Yeast form is much easier to deal with than the other three forms. It can be a normal part of the flora. It's always there. But if we beat up and weaken the normal flora, if we kill it through the different means that are out there, chronic stress, nutrient depletion, pharmaceutical issues like NSAIDs, antibiotics, if that occurs, this can really take over. And when it takes over, it starts to change into different forms. The four forms that Candida can be in is a mold, a fungus, and a fungal parasite. This is the filamentous form. The mold, fungus, and fungal parasite all have filamentous forms, where you have the yeast head and a filament that's basically a feeding tubule that goes out. With that, we look at the crosstalk that goes on. The bacteria talk back and forth in the microbiota, and that talking back and forth communicates with our central nervous system, our brain in particular. There's an extensive nervous system throughout the gut, and it links into our immune function and into our brain function. There's a vicious cycle that occurs with infection of yeast and reoccurrence of that. Typically, people get some kind of infection. They go to the doctor, they get antibiotics. The antibiotics wipe out the healthy flora. That allows pathogenic things like Candida to overgrow. That Candida creates toxins. That weakens the immune system. And that allows us for another infection, which starts to cycle all over again. The same cycle can occur with nutrient depletion, with chronic stress. It's all widely been known that a huge risk factor for chronic Candida infections is broad-spectrum antibiotics. It's throughout the literature. And whenever that occurs, it sets up the scenario to wipe out the healthy microbiota, the healthy flora, and allow the pathogenic stuff to start to grow. Also damage the intestinal mucosa, and chronic steroid therapies will do the same. Increased colonization of Candida or systemic candidiasis is a common, generally accepted major risk factor whenever they use antibiotics. Now, some don't realize that Candida can become systemic. But as soon as we start to break down some of the barriers we're going to cover later, it moves out of the places it started to grow and can become systemic. And that's when health really starts to decline quickly. So it loves to feed on these factors: sweets, desserts, chocolates, breads, dairy. It also loves to feed on heavy metals. Amalgam in the teeth is one of the biggest sources of heavy metals. But our carbonated beverages in aluminum cans is another source of heavy metal toxicity. Aluminum is one of the biggest ones as far as heavy metals, and it's a huge problem. Diabetes, because of the change in blood sugar, and with that the change in circulation. With a change in circulation, it changes the nutrients that are delivered to the different cells and the oxygen that's delivered to the different cells. It's a huge risk factor. And overconsumption of alcohol is another big risk factor for Candida overgrowth. So if you like this, hit the like, subscribe to our channel. We'll be back with more videos like this.